The UNDP, or the United Nations Development Programme, has been active in Uzbekistan since 1993, and they have a new resident representative. Akiko Fujii, the UNDP's new resident representative here in Uzbekistan, with 25 years of experience within the UN system, Akiko Fujii is definitely well positioned to make a lasting change in Uzbekistan. Her history spans climate change, governance, humanitarian crises, as well as gender. She's going to join us in a few minutes, and let's hear a little bit more about what she has to say about the UNDP's programs here in Uzbekistan. You have quite a rich history of, you were in Pakistan, in Indonesia,
Vietnam, Pakistan, Sudan, and then I have lived and worked for Pacific island states. I also worked in another small island country, Maldives. And Jamaica. So I have actually lived and worked for many small island development states.
And now you're in a double landlocked country.
Yes.
How's that kind of comparison between those two different environments for you?
I think that's really a good starting point to talk about the geographical isolation, which I has been, of course, noticing since I came here. People talk about the double landlocked country situation here. But I have also lived in small islands which are so isolated by vast sea, particularly in somewhere like Kiribati. The wide ocean and their country, the small islands are spread over 6,000 kilometers in the ocean. Really, having a difficulty to be connected in terms of service provisions and the trade, etc., etc. So I see some commonalities in terms of the development challenges, but at the same time, Uzbekistan has several, interestingly favorable developing situations. One of which I notice everywhere is definitely the demographic trend of growing younger population, which is really a great asset to this country.
Yes, because 60% of the population, I believe, are under the age of 30.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting demographic to have because they're all supposed to be fresh and young and energetic, and I believe they all have that drive to help better their country.
Absolutely, but we can't really talk about the growing youth as a sort of standalone population, because these youth are growing in their families, in their societies and the social fabrics, which have been really sort of developed over the history and over years. And one good part that I again see in this country is these younger people also have the tradition of certain values which respect, for example, diversity. I can see a lot of ethnic diversity here. People speak multi-languages to start off with. But most importantly, the value of living together in harmony is really providing the positive basis for social fabric and the sustainable growth in this country.
That sense of community.
Absolutely, yes. And the younger generation is sort of like inheriting and that value and the social respect, which is really important aspect of the social development in the future.
And what kind of, for me, there are other aspects that are impacted by the social development as well. It's not only education or general peacefulness in the society, but it also impacts the health and well-being of people. The governance of the country as well is impacted by this.
Yes, absolutely. I think the political system and the strength in the general governance system and the people's, more than anything else, I think the trust by people in government institutions and at the center and also the localities, and the culture of transparency is particularly important because I think particularly when we are talking about a young population, they would like to have the equal and the fair opportunities for the future.
Yes.
So it's not only about one thing like education, jobs, but it's sort of multiple areas of opportunities that they would like to see provided in a fair manner that can be provided only by the pro-poor policy and the sustainable governance and the strong institutions.
And could we touch a bit on how UNDP is helping to achieve the transparency and the good governance and helping to get the institutions where they need to be to reach the demands of the population?
Well, we support, of course, in general, the entire sectors of the reforms that the government is really pushing forward. When it comes to the implementation, that's where, of course, the various challenges and opportunities occur. So as UNDP, we really look at the key critical governance institutions, such as preventing corruption, because we all know that the corruption drains the resources that are needed by people. And in the corrupted system, the people who are most affected negatively by corruption are the people at the bottom, because they have to pay the price, which they cannot pay. And otherwise, the society could have benefited from these people who can achieve better and contribute to the economy in return. So we are looking at the legal system of preventing corruption, and we work with media, such as yourself, to ensure the media freedom so that people will have access to the information and the data, which is accurate, and can have a critical thinking, and also be aware about the justice system to protect themselves, but also to find out where more people can contribute to correct these governance systems.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work, but the right policies can help a lot, even to start off with, because if you do not have policies, if you do not have the legal framework, you are not able to implement even these concepts that we are talking about here. So it's a good big start that we are seeing.
And I think that also contributes, we just touched on that a bit before, was having the society on board and working together collectively with the system. Because I believe Uzbekistan has all of the right legislation in place, but when it comes...
Not all, but
a lot.
I think there are many ways I think we can still improve. But yes, you are right. The matter is more about the implementation.
The implementation, and I think that also comes down to, at the societal level, is the acceptance of new norms within these legalities, because I know a lot of people accept that corruption is just part of the course. It's just accepted as normal. Yes, we have to pay this person to say thank you, or they did us a favor, so we need to give them a bit of a gift, and it's just become part of that. So I believe it's battling this in a sense as well.
I think you are touching upon a very important issue about ending the corruption is not only having the right legal instruments, but people need to use those instruments and also see the consequences of not following the rule of law, society, regulations. And it requires a whole of society approach. But for example, if, let's say, the government system doesn't benefit or reward the teachers, let's say, in the education system in such a way that the teachers can have the basic living in terms of the salary rewards, obviously, there could be some incentives and the motivations for them to go alternative route to support their own families and children. So we need to look at the whole society and where the system can actually work better to avoid such situation and provide the justice to everyone, whereby the legal system can be followed more strictly.
And one of the reasons we chose this park was because not only is it one of my favorite green places here in the city, but the community here fought really hard to keep it as a green space. Just a few years ago, there were plans to completely demolish it and build skyscrapers. So this is kind of a legacy of that community coming together.
Right. I guess so. And again, going back to the strong sense and the value that people of Uzbekistan actually have nurtured over the years are now benefiting, I think, the cities and the rural places as well to protect the natural resources. I think the value also is respecting equality. And equality, when we talk about, the equality between the current generation and the future generations. And I feel the people here have a strong sort of sense of responsibilities, not to deplete the natural resources in the current generation, but somehow to continue to pass on these great natural resources for the future generations to thrive as well. So it's all come to the concept of equality and what is fair for the future generation.
It's going to be hard to strike that balance between development and sustainability.
I think it looks challenging, it sounds challenging, but when it comes to the possibilities, the vast possibility that we have in front of us, let's say the use of the technology, which can really tremendously change the way we use water, the way we use lands, soils. The land degradation, of course, is happening because of the climate change, and a lot of man-made disasters in terms of, for example, like a waste, plastic waste everywhere, and changing the way we live and damaging the soil. But with the use of technologies now, we are trying to save, for example, water with water drip irrigation happening in the rural areas and transforming, the agricultural sector. So it is possible. All we have to do is to look at the innovative ways how to transform the way we have been consuming and using our land with the right policies.
So it's a combination of the individual and the government working together.
I think the individual awareness is important, but when we talk about the transformative changes, obviously we need to have the legal framework, policies, and making sure that the allocation of resources, including the financial as well as technical resources, to be allocated to the places which need those technologies most.
Well, I was just thinking, since we're in this beautiful park, you want to go for a bit of a walk?
Yeah, okay, why not?
Now, we were just talking about the resources and allocating them appropriately, and Uzbekistan has made a lot of deals recently with Germany and China to extract a lot of those resources and sell them. I know this wasn't part of our questions, but do you see any way that this will impact the way that the resources are used here internally?
I see. Well, I'm probably not too familiar with the particular issues that you are talking about, so I cannot probably, comment specifically on that. But one thing I can say is, of course, the natural resource management is not really confined in the boundary of the nation. And in any case, the borders of the nations have been changing over the histories. What I want to say is basically the natural resource management is, it needs to recognize the entire sort of ecosystem of where the water comes from and then where does it run through.
Yes.
And the land is in any case connected with the rivers and mountains and the whole sort of, ecosystem landscape management is an important aspect.
Yes.
And to that extent, the government policy of looking at the regional shared common natural resource management approach is effective. Is effective because otherwise you cannot really have effective natural resource management within the country. So,
because these resources transcend borders, specifically water, any natural disasters like the Aral Sea, they all impact the region as a whole.
Absolutely. So in UNDP also, we are taking the sub-regional approach when we try to tackle the issues of disaster management and particularly, how we look at this urban-rural divide and the different disaster experiences that the people are experiencing in the rural and the urban cities needs to be looked at in a holistic manner at the regional level.
So then what kind of challenges and opportunities do you see in this divide between urban and rural here?
So let me quote maybe something from our recent study that we have conducted with the government of Uzbekistan, which is about finding out about multidimensional poverty experiences in the country. And we have found 18.4% of the population experiencing various multiple vulnerability experiences. And the gap between urban and the rural population became very clear.
Yeah.
So the basic services such as access to water, sanitation, education, and the health facilities much lower in rural population. So that somehow needs to be addressed because it affects people's opportunities in the lifetime.
Yeah, opportunities for education.
Yes.
Opportunities to be healthy.
Yes, and self-realization in the life and also people's dignity in terms of living in such conditions.
And from that study as well, there was also another study that focused on, it was MODA, that was kind of they were sort of aligned with each other. And one study showed that, I believe it was multidimensional poverty, girls versus boys. I believe girls had less multidimensional poverty than boys, whereas with MODA it was, in terms of monetary poverty, it was the opposite.
I think, we need to really look at the different dimensions and the methodologies of how these measurements are being taking place. But we should also look at more sort of institutionalized gender gap, which is happening, of course, not only in Uzbekistan, but everywhere in the world. So I must start off by saying nowhere in the world, no country in the world has achieved 100% of gender equality. Unfortunately, but we still try to achieve the 100% gender equality, which means, everything we do at UNDP will have to mainstream the gender equality and look at where the gaps are and the root causes of those gender equalities.
And in Uzbekistan in particular, what have you noticed maybe compared to other places you've been are causing those inequalities?
Many of the countries that I have I have lived, have similar sort of gender inequality causes. The main part actually is caused by the stereotypes that somehow people have developed over the years.
Yes.
And the result of the gender stereotypes, of course, that goes into each fabric of the society and the economy. Starting from, what kind of work you do, what kind of, schools you go, and then what kind of subjects do you learn, to the event of maybe like how to raise your boys and girls in the family, and what to wear and what to eat. So what I'm trying to say is, we really need to tackle the issue of unconscious biases that each one of us has about gender roles, and starting from there. That is not enough, of course. A lot of the problems which are happening are also lack of the legal systems and also the implementation of the legal system. When we look at the especially harmful practices such as gender-based violences, we need the strong law, the legal system, but also implementation of free legal aid, assistance to the victims, and tangible solutions which the government and everybody in the society needs to achieve.
Yeah, and a lot of that also is really ingrained in mindset of what is appropriate behavior, how to engage with the opposite sex, why is it not appropriate to hit your wife?
It is true, because in our recent study again of behavioral insight, up to 90% of the Uzbekistan population have one or more gender stereotypes and the discrimination in the country. So it is a huge, vast population that we are talking about who have some level of a bias, and women themselves somehow feel it is okay to be beaten up by your husbands when he has a right reason.
Yes.
And we must say there is no right reason in this world to beat up your wife.
Or anyone.
Or anyone.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, then how do you go about changing those mindsets? How do you go about making a lasting change to making people be aware that equality does not mean one is better than the other? It just means equal opportunities and equal access.
Well, again, we need to look at the different parts of the social fabrics, but I have to start with the legal system, which has to be clear and also needs to be implemented. And what is important here is a strong justice system where people who are unfortunately, have become victims can be protected and in a fair manner. Regardless of how much money you have, the justice system has to work for the victims in a speedy manner, and then also to have the necessary states provisions such as free legal aid, which is promised in the constitution, but it has to happen.
Yes. So it just kind of touches back on what we discussed before. Legislation and some provisions are there but not being implemented.
It can be stronger. Yes.
Yeah. And you have a background working with gender and gender studies, and I believe that you and your team can have a good impact here over the next few years.
I hope so. I have a strong hope, not only about the gender equalities, but UNDP is here and also globally in all of the 170 country offices. Uzbekistan is one of them. We really implement the program to support the government to reduce poverty and inequality. So in that sense, I think one of the biggest, of course, inequalities happening in this country is gender inequality, but also targeting at the young population. Youth in general have also more underemployment, unemployment, and there are experiences in the world that these inequalities can be effectively tackled if the right policy in place.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. We are confident to address those. Yes.
And I look forward to seeing the positive results coming out.
Thank you so much.
And I believe one of my final questions is, what vision do you have for your time here in Uzbekistan? Is there any one thing that you would really like to see reach an almost or near completion or completion while you're here?
I think, you see, we really have a good setup here. UNDP has a universal presence policy, meaning we have the office in the center to deal with the policy issues and the legal framework issues, the strategies, at the national level. But we also have, offices in the regions, in the communities. We have 40 projects spread around in the country. So I have a very strong sense of, UNDP being able to look at the policy matters, to be connected with the community experiences, what we observe, people's experiences there in poverty. That is a great advantage. And in my time, I would like to perhaps strengthen even more about targeting our programs at those people who are at risk of falling into poverty. Otherwise, if they do not have the stronger policies and projects supporting them.
And that is through working alongside the government here.
That is definitely working alongside with the government, because we strongly believe that the strong institutions and the strong governance is the key for the lasting impact. So we never do anything independently outside of the government system, because our purpose here is to strengthen the government system and the culture and the entire sort of governance, including civil society, working with the media, and as a whole, to make the impact for the lasting peace and development.
Fingers crossed, inshallah.
Thank you.
We hope so.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I
Of
really
course.
enjoyed talking with you.
Me too. Excellent.